The rain fell hard on the metal roofs of District 7. It was the kind of rain that made people stay inside and lock their doors. The streets were empty. The lights in most shops had gone dark hours ago. But in one small building at the end of a narrow alley, a single lamp still burned. David Park wiped his hands on a dirty rag and looked at the clock on the wall. It was past midnight. He had been working on an old transport engine for 12 hours straight. His back hurt. His eyes were tired. But he smiled as he listened to the engine hum to life. It was a good sound. The sound of something broken becoming whole again. David was 43 years old. He had gray in his hair and grease under his fingernails that never quite washed away. He was a mechanic, one of the last human mechanics in the outer colonies. Most repair work these days was done by machines fixing other machines. Aliens looked at humans and saw a primitive species. They saw creatures who still used their hands, who still got dirty, who still made mistakes. But David did not care what aliens thought. He loved his work. He loved taking things apart and putting them back together. He loved the moment when something that was dead started to live again. He walked to the front of his shop and began pulling down the metal shutters. The rain was getting worse. Thunder rolled across the sky like the growl of some giant beast. David was thinking about the bowl of noodles waiting for him in his small apartment upstairs when he heard it. A crash. Then a scraping sound. Something was moving outside his door. David stopped. He listened. The sound came again. It was like metal dragging against stone. Then came a voice. Weak, broken, almost human. Please, help me. David opened the door. A figure fell forward into his shop. It was a droid, but it was not like any droid David had ever seen. Its body was made from metals that seemed to glow with an inner light. Its circuits were beautiful, like the veins of some alien flower, but it was badly damaged. Plasma burns covered its chest. One of its arms hung loose, connected only by a few sparking wires. Fluid leaked from a wound in its side. The droid looked up at David with optical sensors that flickered like dying stars. Please, it said again. I cannot pay you. I have nothing. But without repair, I will cease to function. I will die. David did not think about payment. He did not think about the danger. He did not think about anything, except that there was something in front of him that was broken and needed to be fixed. He bent down and put his arms under the droid. It was heavier than he expected. He dragged it inside and laid it on his workbench. The droid made a sound that was almost like a sigh. Why? It asked. Why are you helping me? David did not answer. He was already looking at the damage, already making a list in his head of what needed to be done. The burns were bad. The internal systems were failing. The power core was cracked. Any other mechanic would have said it was impossible. The technology was too advanced. The damage was too severe. But David was not any other mechanic. He worked through the night. The storm raged outside, but inside the shop there was only the sound of tools and the soft hum of machines. David talked to the droid as he worked. He always talked to the things he fixed. He told it about his life, about how he had come to District 7 20 years ago with nothing but a bag of tools and a dream, about how he had built this shop with his own hands, about his wife who had died 5 years ago and how he still missed her every day. The droid listened. Its optical sensors followed David as he moved around the workbench. Sometimes it asked questions. Its voice grew stronger as David repaired its vocal systems. You speak to me as if I am a person, the droid said. David shrugged. Maybe you are. Maybe you are not. Does it matter? You are here. You are in pain. You asked for help. That is enough for me. The droid was quiet for a long time after that. David worked until his hands shook with exhaustion. He used tools that were old and simple. He made repairs that should not have been possible. He jury-rigged connections and soldered circuits and used tricks. He had learned over decades of fixing things that other people had given up on, and slowly, the droid began to heal Dot. By the time the sun rose, David was finished. He sat back in his chair, his whole body aching, and watched as the droid sat up on the workbench. Its optical sensors were bright now. Its movements were smooth. The wound in its side was sealed. Its arm was reattached. The droid looked down at its hands. It opened and closed its fingers. Then it looked at David. "You saved my life," it said. "I told you I could not pay. I told you I had nothing to give. But you helped me anyway." "Why?" David stood up slowly. His knees popped. He was too old to stay up all night working, but he did not regret it. "Because you needed help," he said. "That is reason enough. It has always been reason enough." The droid stood. It was taller than David. It moved with a grace that no machine he had ever seen could match. It walked to the door and stopped. It looked back at him one more time. "I am called Unit 7 Alpha," it said. "I will not forget what you did for me, David Park. I will not forget your kindness." Then it walked out into the morning light and disappeared. David watched it go. He stood in his doorway for a long moment, looking at the empty street. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. It was going to be a beautiful day. He shook his head and smiled to himself. Strange things happened in District 7. That was just the way of the world. He turned and walked back into his shop. There was work to do. There was always work to do. He did not know that his life had just changed forever. He did not know that the droid he had saved was not just any machine. He did not know that by the time the sun set again, his shop would be surrounded by the most powerful soldiers in the galaxy. He did not know any of this. He simply made himself a cup of coffee, sat down in his chair, and waited for his next customer. That was the kind of man David Park was. He did not help people because he wanted something in return. He helped people because it was the right thing to do. And sometimes the universe notices when someone does the right thing. David spent the day like he spent every other day. He fixed things. A hover bike with a broken engine. A cleaning droid that had stopped working. A navigation system from a small cargo ship. People came to his shop because he was good at his job and because he was fair. He never charged more than people could pay. Sometimes he charged nothing at all. By evening, David had almost forgotten about the strange droid from the night before. Almost, but not quite. There had been something different about that machine. Something he could not explain. The way it spoke. The way it looked at him. The way it said thank you like it truly meant it. He was closing up his shop when he heard the sound. It started as a low hum. Then it grew louder. David looked up at the sky and felt his heart stop. Ships. Dozens of ships. They were not like any ships he had ever seen. They were huge and black and covered with golden symbols that seemed to burn with their own light. They moved through the sky like predators, silent and deadly. And they were coming straight toward District 7. David stepped outside. All around him, people were coming out of their homes and shops. They looked up at the sky with fear in their eyes. Some of them started to run. Others just stood and stared. The ships stopped directly above David's shop. They hung in the air like dark clouds. Then smaller vessels began to descend. They landed in the street, crushing old crates and garbage under their weight. Their doors opened. Soldiers came out. David had seen aliens before. District 7 was full of them. But he had never seen anything like these. They were 7 feet tall, with bodies covered in scales that shimmered like jewels. They wore armor made from some metal that seemed to absorb light. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. and they moved with the precision of machines. There were at least 50 of them. They formed a perfect circle around David's shop. Not one of them said a word. They simply stood there, waiting. David's neighbors had all disappeared. The street was empty except for him and the soldiers. His heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. But he did not run. He had never been the kind of man who ran from trouble. He stepped forward with his hands raised. "I do not want any problems," he said. "Whatever is happening here, I am sure we can talk about it." The soldiers did not respond. They did not even look at him. They just kept staring straight ahead, like statues made of flesh and metal. Then another ship descended. This one was different from the others. It was smaller, but more beautiful. Its surface was covered with patterns that seemed to move and change. It landed directly in front of David, and its door opened. A woman stepped out. She was human. That was the first thing David noticed. She had black hair cut short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. She wore armor similar to the soldiers, but hers was decorated with symbols that marked her as someone important. Very important. Behind her came a familiar figure. Unit 7 Alpha. The droid David had repaired. It looked perfect now, shining and whole. It walked beside the woman like a shadow. The woman stalked a few feet from David. She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were cold and hard. "David Park," she said. Her voice was loud and clear. Everyone in the district could hear it. "I am High Commander Rachel Yoon of the Imperial Royal Guard of the Valorian Empire." David felt his legs go weak. The Valorian Empire. He knew that name. Everyone knew that name. They were the most powerful civilization in the known galaxy. They controlled 1,000 worlds. Their technology was 1,000,000 years ahead of anything humans had, and their royal guard was legendary. They were the best soldiers in the universe, sworn to protect the imperial family. What were they doing here? In District 7? At his shop? "You stand accused," Commander Yoon continued, "of rendering aid to a member of the imperial household." David felt the blood drain from his face. Accused. That word meant punishment. That word meant death. "I did not know," he said. His voice was shaking. "I did not know who it was." The droid was damaged. It asked for help. "I only wanted to help." Commander Yoon stared at him. Her face showed nothing. Then, slowly, the corner of her mouth turned up. It was not much of a smile, but it was there. "You misunderstand," she said. "You are not being accused of a crime. You are being accused of extraordinary kindness." David blinked. "What?" Unit 7 Alpha stepped forward. "David Park," it said, and now its voice was different somehow. Softer, more alive. "I was not honest with you last night. I am not simply a droid. I am a vessel. My body contains the consciousness of Princess Grace Kim, heir to the throne of the Valorian Empire." David felt like the ground was falling away beneath his feet. "There was an assassination attempt," the droid continued. "My biological body was badly damaged. To save my life, my mind was uploaded into this unit. I was being transported to safety when the assassins found me again. They shot down my ship. I crashed in your district. I was dying when I came to your door." David remembered the plasma burns, the cracked power core, the damage that should have been impossible to fix. "You saved me," Princess Grace said. "You had nothing to gain. You knew I could not pay you. But you worked through the night to repair me. You talked to me like I was a person. You showed me kindness when I was nothing but a broken machine." Commander Yoon stepped forward. "What you did last night, David Park, is something that will be remembered for 1,000 years. You saved the future Empress of the Valorian Empire. And you did it for no reason except that it was the right thing to do." David did not know what to say. He stood there in the middle of the street, surrounded by soldiers, looking at a droid that contained a princess, and tried to understand how his life had changed so completely in a single day. What happens now? Yes, Commander Yoon and Princess Grace looked at each other. Then they looked back at David. Now, Princess Grace said, you come with us. My father, the Emperor, wishes to meet the human who saved his daughter. He wishes to thank you personally. David looked at his shop, at his home, at the life he had built over 20 years. Then he looked at the sky full of ships, at the soldiers who could crush him without effort, at the princess who was watching him with eyes that seemed to hold the light of distant stars. He took a deep breath. Let me get my coat, he said, and that was how David Park, a simple mechanic from District 7, began his journey to the heart of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The journey took 3 days. David traveled in a ship that was larger than his entire district. He had a room with a bed softer than anything he had ever slept on. He had food that tasted like nothing he had ever eaten. Servants came to check on him every few hours. They brought him new clothes made from fabrics that felt like water against his skin. But David could not enjoy any of it. He was too nervous. He was going to meet the Emperor of the Valorian Empire, a being so powerful that entire planets trembled at the mention of his name. What would he say? How would he act? He was just a mechanic. He fixed broken machines. He did not belong in the world of emperors and princesses. On the 3rd day, the ship arrived at its destination. David looked out his window and forgot how to breathe. The Imperial Court was not a building. It was not even a city. It was an entire moon. Someone had taken a moon and turned it into a palace. Its surface was covered with towers made of crystal and light. Rivers of energy flowed between the buildings like glowing veins. Ships moved through the sky like schools of fish. It was the most beautiful thing David had ever seen. Commander Yoon came to get him. She looked different now. Her armor was even more decorated. Her face was still hard, but there was something like respect in her eyes when she looked at him. Are you ready? She asked. David laughed. It was not a happy laugh. No, I do not think I will ever be ready for this. Commander, you nodded. Good, that means you are honest. The Emperor values honesty. They walked through halls that seemed to go on forever. Everywhere David looked, he saw wonders. Statues that moved and spoke. Paintings that showed scenes from history playing out in real time. Gardens filled with plants from 1,000 worlds. And everywhere, there were aliens. Hundreds of different species, all of them watching David as he passed. He heard them whispering, "That is the human. The one who saved the princess. He looks so ordinary. How did someone like him do something like that?" David kept his head up and his back straight. He was ordinary. He knew that. But he had done what he had done, and he was not ashamed of it. Finally, they reached the throne room. The doors were 100 feet tall. They opened slowly, revealing a space so large that David could not see the other end. The ceiling was made of something that looked like frozen starlight. The floor was polished until it reflected everything like a mirror. And at the far end, on a throne made of pure energy, sat the Emperor. David had expected something terrifying. He had expected a monster or a giant, or something so alien that his mind could not understand it. But Emperor Thomas Cho was none of those things. He was old, ancient even. His body was more light than flesh. He floated above his throne like a ghost made of stars. But his eyes were kind. They reminded David of his grandfather, who had died when David was young. Beside the throne stood Princess Grace. She was no longer a droid. Her consciousness had been returned to her biological body. She was a young woman with long black hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. She wore a dress that seemed to be made of moonlight. She smiled when she saw David. Thousands of people filled the throne room. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy. They all turned to watch as David walked toward the throne. His footsteps echoed in the silence. He stopped at the base of the throne and did what he thought was right. He bowed his head. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am honored to be here." The Emperor's voice was like music. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. "David Park, human, mechanic, savior of my daughter. Rise. Let me see your face." David lifted his head. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. "My advisors told me about humans," he said. "They told me your species is young, primitive, selfish, short-lived. They told me you think only of yourselves. They told me you are not worth the attention of the Empire." David felt a flash of anger. He pushed it down. "With respect, Your Majesty, your advisors do not know humans very well." The throne room went silent. No one spoke to the Emperor like that. No one dared, but the Emperor did not seem angry. His eyes actually seemed to brighten. "Tell me then. Tell me what your advisors have wrong." David took a deep breath. He thought about his life, about his wife, who had spent her last months helping others even when she was dying, about his neighbors in District 7, who had so little but always shared what they had, about all the humans he had known who had done good things without expecting anything in return. "We are not special because we are strong," David said. "We are not special because we are smart. There are many species in this galaxy that are stronger and smarter than us. But we are special because sometimes we choose to be kind when it costs us everything and gains us nothing. We help strangers. We sacrifice for people we have never met. We do the right thing even when no one is watching. That is not primitive, Your Majesty. That is the whole point of being alive." The throne room was completely still. David could hear his own heart beating. Then Princess Grace stepped forward. "Father," she said, "I request that this man be given the Covenant of the Crown, the highest honor we can give to someone outside our empire. He has earned it." The Emperor looked at his daughter. Then he looked at David. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he nodded. "So be it," the Emperor said. "David Park, from this day forward, you are under the protection of the Valorian throne. No law in our empire can touch you. No hand can harm you. And you will have a seat on my advisory council. Your voice will be heard in the halls of power." David did not know what to say. He had come here expecting to be thanked and sent home. He had not expected this. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am just a mechanic. I fix things. I do not know anything about politics or power." The Emperor smiled. It was a warm smile, full of ancient wisdom. "That is exactly why I want you here," he said. "You see what others cannot. You care when others do not. The galaxy needs more people like you, David Park, and I intend to make sure your voice is heard." David looked at Princess Grace. She nodded at him, encouraging him. He took a deep breath. He was a long way from his little shop in District 7. He was a long way from everything he knew. But maybe that was okay. Maybe sometimes the universe had bigger plans. "I accept," he said that, and with those two words, David Park became the most important human in the galaxy. 6 months passed. David learned many things in those months. He learned how to walk in the halls of power. He learned how to speak to beings who were older than human civilization. He learned how to listen when others talked and how to speak when others were silent. But he never forgot who he was. He never forgot where he came from. The Covenant of the Crown made him untouchable. No one could arrest him or hurt him or threaten him. But more importantly, it gave him a voice. And David used that voice to speak for his people. He talked about the human colonies, about how they struggled to survive on the edges of the galaxy, about how alien corporations took their resources and gave nothing in return, about how human children grew up believing they were worthless because that was what the galaxy told them. The Emperor listened. Princess Grace listened. And slowly, things began to change. Trade agreements were rewritten to be more fair. Protection treaties were signed that kept human worlds safe from pirates and raiders. Schools were built. Hospitals were funded. For the first time in generations, humans began to hope that things might get better. David became known throughout the galaxy. People called him the Human Ambassador, even though he had no official title. They called him the Mechanic King, which made him laugh. He was no king. He was still just a man who fixed things. The only difference was that now he was fixing bigger things than engines and droids. But not everyone was happy about his rise. Lord William Kang was a Valerian noble from one of the oldest families in the Empire. His ancestors had helped build the throne. His family controlled 100 worlds. And he hated humans with every fiber of his being. To Lord Kang, humans were insects. They were pests that needed to be crushed. The idea that a human could sit on the advisory council made his blood boil. The idea that the Emperor would listen to a human made him sick. He began to plan. Lord Kang was not stupid. He knew he could not attack David directly. The Covenant of the Crown protected him. But there were other ways to destroy someone. Ways that did not leave fingerprints. Ways that could not be traced back to their source. He reached out to the same assassins who had tried to kill Princess Grace. They had failed once, but they were still out there, hiding in the shadows of the galaxy. Lord Kang offered them something they could not refuse: money, power, protection. All they had to do was kill one human and make it look like an accident. But Lord Kang wanted more than just David's death. He wanted to destroy humanity's reputation forever. So he added another part to his plan. After David was dead, evidence would be planted. Evidence that showed humans had been planning terrorist attacks against the Empire. Evidence that would turn the galaxy against humanity forever. It was a perfect plan. Or so Lord Kang thought. What he did not know was that someone was watching him. Emily Beak was 28 years old. She was one of the few humans ever allowed to serve in the Royal Guard. She had worked her whole life to earn that honor. She was fast, smart, and deadly. And she had been assigned to protect David Park. At first, Emily had not liked her assignment. She was a soldier, not a babysitter. She wanted to fight real enemies, not follow around some old mechanic. But over time, she began to understand why David was important. She watched how he treated people. She listened to how he spoke. She saw how he never asked for anything for himself, only for others. She began to respect him. And then she began to care about him. So when she noticed Lord Kang's servants meeting with suspicious figures in dark corners of the palace, she paid attention. When she saw encrypted messages being sent to hidden locations, she tracked them. When she found evidence of the plot against David, she knew she had to act. She came to David late one night. He was in his quarters, reading reports about a new trade agreement. He looked tired but determined. He always looked like that these days. "We have a problem," Emily said. She told him everything. The assassins. The fake evidence. Lord Kang's plan to destroy humanity. David listened without speaking. His face grew pale, but his eyes stayed calm. "How long do we have?" he asked when she finished. "Days, maybe less. Lord Kang's forces are already moving. The attack will happen during the Festival of Eternal Light. Maximum chaos. Maximum casualties." The Festival of Eternal Light was the holiest day in the Valorian calendar. Billions of people would be celebrating. The Emperor himself would be attending ceremonies in the palace. Security would be focused on the crowds, not on a single human. "You should run," Emily said. "I can get you to the human sectors. You can hide there. We can figure out what to do next." David shook his head. I did not run when a broken droid showed up at my door. I am not running now. Emily stared at him. This is different. These are professional killers. They have already tried to kill a princess. They will not fail twice. Maybe, David said, but if I run, Lord Kang wins. He proves that humans are cowards. He proves that we do not deserve our place in the galaxy. I will not give him that satisfaction. Then what do we do? David was quiet for a long moment. He thought about everything he had learned in the past 6 months. About the palace. About its systems. About the people who lived and worked there. We cannot stop the attack, he said finally. But maybe we can be ready for it. Maybe we can turn Lord Kang's plan against him. Emily leaned forward. How? David smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who saw a broken machine and knew exactly how to fix it. I have an idea, he said, but I am going to need your help. And I am going to need you to trust me. Emily looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. I trust you, she said. Tell me what to do. And together, they began to plan. The Festival of Eternal Light filled the palace with music and color. Millions of beings from across the galaxy had come to celebrate. They wore their finest clothes. They danced in the great halls. They watched as performers created wonders of light and sound. It was supposed to be a day of joy and peace, but David could not enjoy any of it. He moved through the crowds with his heart beating fast and his eyes watching every shadow. Emily was beside him, her hand never far from her weapon. They were waiting. They knew the attack was coming. They just did not know exactly when. The answer came at sunset. A sound like thunder rolled across the palace. Then another. Then another. David looked up and saw ships breaking through the shields that protected the imperial court. They were dark and fast, and they carried death in their bellies. Alarms screamed. People began to run. The royal guard tried to maintain order, but there were too many people and not enough soldiers. Chaos spread like fire. It is starting, Emily said. Her voice was calm, but David could see the tension in her body. Then we need to move, David replied. Now, they had planned for this. While Lord Kang's assassins attacked the festival, David and Emily would go somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that Lord Kang had not thought about. Somewhere that could change everything. The palace's central power core. It was located deep beneath the throne room. It was the heart of the entire moon. Every shield, every weapon, every system in the palace drew power from it. If the core failed, the palace would be defenseless. And David had spent weeks studying its design. He knew it was Valorian technology. He knew it was 1,000,000 years more advanced than anything humans had built. He knew that no one was supposed to touch it without months of preparation. But he also knew that machines were machines. And he had been fixing machines his entire life. They ran through corridors that were filled with smoke and screaming. Explosions shook the walls. Twice they had to hide from assassins who were hunting for them. But Emily was good at her job, and David knew the palace better than Lord Kang had expected. They reached the power core chamber, just as another explosion rocked the palace. The great doors were sealed, but Emily had the codes. She punched them in with fingers that did not shake, and the doors slid open. The power core was beautiful. It was also dying. David could see the damage immediately. One of Lord Kang's ships had hit the palace in exactly the wrong spot. The core's containment was failing. Energy was leaking out in waves that made David's teeth hurt. In minutes, the core would fail completely. The shields would fall. The palace would be defenseless. Millions would die. Can you fix it? Emily asked. David looked at the core. It was alien technology. It was impossibly complex. He had no tools except his hands and his mind. I do not know, he said honestly. "But I am going to try." He walked toward the core. The energy waves grew stronger. His skin began to burn. He could feel the radiation eating into his body. He knew that every second he spent near the core was taking years off his life. He did not care. He put his hands on the control panel and began to work. The technology was different from anything he had ever seen, but the principles were the same. Energy flowed through systems. Systems connected to other systems. Everything had a purpose. Everything had a function. You just had to understand what that purpose was. David talked to the core as he worked. He told it about his wife. He told it about his shop. He told it about the droid that had come to his door in the rain. He told it that he knew it wanted to work. He told it that he was going to help it. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. David lost track of time. His hands moved without stopping. He rerouted power. He sealed breaches. He convinced systems that were shutting down to keep running for just a little longer. The battle raged above him. He could hear the explosions getting closer. He could hear Emily fighting off assassins who had found them. He could hear her shouting at him to hurry, but he did not hurry. You could not hurry this kind of work. You had to be patient. You had to be gentle. You had to trust that the machine wanted to be fixed. And finally, the core stabilized. The containment sealed. The energy waves stopped. The shields that protected the palace roared back to life. Lord Kang's ships, which had been preparing to land their ground forces, suddenly found themselves trapped inside a barrier they could not break. David stepped back from the core. His hands were burned. His whole body was shaking. He could barely stand, but he was smiling. Emily appeared beside him. Her armor was damaged. There was blood on her face that might or might not have been hers. She looked at the core, then at David. "You did it," she said. "We did it," David replied. "All of us." The battle ended quickly after that. Without their ships providing support, Lord Kang's assassins were captured one by one. Lord Kang himself was found trying to escape on a private shuttle. Lord Kang himself, he was brought before the Emperor in chains. David was there when the Emperor passed judgment. He was there when Lord Kang screamed that humans were insects, that they deserved to be crushed, that the Empire was making a terrible mistake. The Emperor did not respond to any of it. He simply looked at Lord Kang with eyes that had seen 1,000,000,000 years of history. "You tried to destroy an innocent people," the Emperor said. "You tried to murder my daughter. You tried to tear apart everything the Empire stands for. And you failed, because you underestimated the very people you despised." Lord Kang was taken away. He would spend the rest of his life in a prison on a dark moon, alone with his hatred. When it was over, Princess Grace found David. He was sitting on a bench in the palace gardens, looking at the stars. His hands were wrapped in bandages. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes were peaceful. "You could have died," Grace said, sitting beside him. "Could have," David agreed. "But someone needed help." Grace laughed softly. "You always say that. Does it ever get old?" David thought about it. He thought about his wife. He thought about his shop. He thought about the droid that had come to his door in the rain. He thought about everything that had happened since that night. "No," he said. "It never gets old. Helping people is why we are here. All of us, human and alien, old and young, rich and poor. We are here to help each other. That is the whole point." Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "My father was right about you," she said. "The galaxy needs more people like you." David did not say anything. He just sat there, holding the princess's hand, watching the stars shine in the endless darkness of space. Years later, the Park Accords would be taught in schools across 100 worlds. They were the treaties that elevated humanity from a minor species to a founding member of the Galactic Compact. They were the laws that guaranteed peace and fairness for billions of beings, and they were all named after a simple mechanic from District 7 who had fixed a broken droid because it was the right thing to do. David went home eventually. He returned to his shop with its rusted shutters and old tools. But now ships from across the galaxy landed in his yard. Princes and pilots came to meet him. Emperors and engineers sought his advice. He welcomed them all. He fixed their machines. He listened to their problems. He helped them when they needed help, because that was what David Park did. That was what humanity did, and the galaxy would never forget it.